This is Mainstreet with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're starting off a little bit late, but what the heck? We're going to give you a little more than an hour's conversation this afternoon. I hope you've had a wonderful week since the last time we spoke. Remember, I'm on every Tuesday at 2 p.m. or thereabouts. We're going to have some fun this afternoon because I have a very pleased and happy guest, a gentleman who has been in the broadcast industry for a very, very long time. He and I both share the fact we both went to the U and very proud of that. But he's also very happy today because Aaron Andrews signed a 4-year, $200 million deal. Mr. Lamont has been a broadcaster not only for Florida Atlantic University, the University of Miami, Fox News, ESPN, Westwood One, you name it, he's been on that platform. He's one of the great broadcasters. He's a dear friend to me to come on this program this afternoon. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Mr. Dave Lamont.
Good afternoon. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing fine, sir. And how was Milwaukee to you?
Terrific. Absolutely fantastic time there. Great fans at the Roth Holman PBA doubles on Fox Sports 1, and they've got the World Series of bowling all week. So that I was thoroughly impressed. The tour hadn't been in Milwaukee in a while, and people turned out and made a lot of noise.
You know, I would figure, I'm originally from up north in Pennsylvania. You're originally from Milwaukee or the Green Bay, up somewhere around there. Virginia.
Yeah.
Then how did you become a Green Bay Packer fan?
Our foster son is a defensive tackle for the Packers. And that's how. I normally root for the Washington team, now the Commanders. But that's not the easiest franchise in the world to root for with the ownership as it is. And with our son, TJ, getting through the University of Florida and being drafted by Green Bay, we became Packers fans.
You know, it's funny. People will ask me, how come? I grew up in Miami. You know, you and I both lived in South Florida a number of years. I'm not there at the moment, but I'm coming home. Hopefully one of these days I can get back home. And they say, well, how come you're a Colt fan and you're from Pennsylvania? You like the Phillies. You like the Celtics. Well, I like the Celtics because my dad is from Boston. And I like the Colts because the very first player I ever saw on TV was Johnny Unitas. Lo and behold, 6 years later, my half-brother Michael is the first-round draft pick of the Baltimore Colts, and it just solidified. And I would go to Carlisle, Pennsylvania for training camp and get to meet Johnny Unitas and carry the water bucket and for him and Raymond Berry, even though Raymond was retired by then, and to watch my brother in action, which was not much different than when he was home. He was mean and just a ornery fellow to get along with.
What's your brother's name?
Mike Curtis.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, he was my half brother. I love him dearly, and unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Let's get to the elephant in the room for you Packer fans. By the way, for those of you who don't know, and I did mention it briefly, Dave and I do share a brotherhood. We both went to the U.
That's right.
I loved my time there. I love that school. We're going to talk about that as we continue to move forward. And when I come home, Lamont and I are going to go to some UM games. His lovely wife. If his lovely wife will come with us, that'll be fantastic.
Well, you'd rather have her anyway, but yes.
Why? She's more of a UM fan than you are, David?
Not at all. No, she's just more fun to be around.
Oh, no, come on now. With some of the friends that you and I have mutually, I know you're a lot of fun to be around. You know, it's funny, too, before I get into the Green Bay Packer thing, you and I have worked, and one of the things I wanted to talk about pre-show, you and I have worked in a lot of the same places, but not at the same time. WIOD, I interned for Larry. WFTL.
No way. Wow.
Yeah. Well, Tubby Boots was my uncle.
How much did he owe you when he left town?
That's what J.J. Wilson constantly will say to me. Come on, Gary, confess to me. What did he owe you?
Well, Gary, it's funny. I had this conversation not a week ago with somebody about Larry King and his impact on this area, South Florida, and then to the other 49 3/4 states around the United States. is that I think he was looked upon as this, hardcore work ethic, jovial elderly grandfather. And the people
No.
down here have a completely different image of him, even though it was a long time ago, to be fair to Larry King, that he left a lot of people high and dry in this area. So when he passed, the reception around most of the country was a royal one. And here it was met with a lot of cynicism. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was. And I would run into him when I lived in Los Angeles as a young actor over at Cantor's on Fairfax Avenue, and he'd buy me lunch, and he was cool, but he never owed me, never asked me for anything. The
You're
only thing
lucky.
he ever, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, ask Mike Ranieri and a few of the people we grew up listening to, but I got the gig because he knew my uncle, Tubby Boots.
Okay.
And Tubby and him would have lunch once in a while, and he mentioned, "Oh, my nephew goes to University of Miami. He's a broadcast student." Larry goes, "Well, have him check out WIOD. Maybe I could use him as an intern." And that's how it started. And I learned an awful lot from him in a very short period of time, borrowing money or not. I mean, you do learn from the man. But
Oh, of
no,
course.
he was not a workaholic. I mean, he did very little research on anything. He just kind of went from the top of his head, and that's what basically propelled him for his entire career. There were times when he was stumped, but rarely. Okay, let's get to the thing that makes you smile the most, besides your wife and the kitty that'll come across the screen every now and then.
We're
By
going to
the
talk
way,
about money.
yeah, no,
Oh.
by the way, I miss your nooners like you wouldn't believe.
I've been really lazy about that lately. And let's see. Well, Friday I was traveling. Yeah, 12. So I really couldn't do it. Monday I was traveling. I was out of town for most of last week, and there's a couple of times where the timing of it is just hideous. So yeah, I'm probably going to get back into it this Friday because I'm going to be home and ready to go. But I
love them.
appreciate that. Yeah, thank
No,
you.
no, David. You know, I always make a comment about him when I get an opportunity
Yeah,
to.
you do. I appreciate
I
it.
do. I love the shows. Joe Casal, I know he watches them too.
Yeah.
I hope Joe is watching now with that little four-legged fellow that's taken over his entire life.
Yeah, for sure.
Little Tasso is
Well, this is
has
what
done
happens
that.
when you don't have children of your own. You end up getting an attachment like that to a dog who has become his child. So
Yeah, yeah, and he's a wonderful little fellow. 4 years, $200 million. Now, I know he wants to get back to another Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers, with all the speculation from all the great prognosticators. Oh, he's going to go to Denver. He's going to go here. And I kept thinking, and I meant to call you and say, Dave, why would he leave Green Bay? I mean, a few pieces added.
I never thought he would.
Yeah. I mean, why did everybody
I
think
never thought he
suddenly he
would.
was going to
I
pick up and
discussed
leave?
this morning.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of things. Let's face it. It doesn't even matter what side you take and all of the controversy regarding vaccinations and masks and all of that. He hurt his image this year.
Oh, yeah.
There were, he weird things about his now ex-fiance and their relationship, and then his comments about the presidency and vaccination. And while that certainly played well with a portion of the country, undoubtedly, a lot of people were turned off by all of this. And then you add to the cynicism about, well, just wait till they get to the playoffs and what happens. He doesn't have a great playoff game. Now, I was at that game. I mean, the Niners played a tremendous defensive game. Lost in all of the hoopla was the injury to A.J. Dillon, which I think on a cold and ultimately snowy day,
Right.
his power run game was more needed than Aaron Jones's speed run game. And the defense for the Packers did not give up a touchdown in that game. They had yet another major special teams breakdown, two of them, in fact, that were super costly, one that led to a field goal and one that led to a touchdown. So it wasn't all on Rodgers, but when you're Aaron Rodgers, you get all the glory and you also get the blame, whether it's fair, and in some ways it should be fair or not. I never thought he would leave Green Bay. I thought, first off, what kind of value are you getting when you're trading the MVP?
Yeah.
How do you make it fair to Green Bay? They're not going to just give him to a team for a second rounder, a fourth rounder, and a conditional seventh rounder. Okay, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So I wondered when the teams that did call, whatever the Packers offered was probably too much. And certainly a team like Denver, which just has acquired Russell Wilson right before we went on the air here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just got Russell Wilson from Seattle pending a physical and Wilson's approval for apparently more than one number one draft choice, which makes sense.
You would think,
So,
yeah.
So now you've got the AFC West is loaded up. with quality quarterbacks. You've got I just thought, now, can Rodgers rehab his image? Never mind nationally, but in Green Bay. That's obviously as loyal a fan base as you're ever going to see, along with Pittsburgh and Buffalo. I think are the top 3 fan bases in the NFL. But he also has some national rehabbing to do, I think. Now, unless he just doesn't give a hoot and he's going to go ahead and just be the same guy and play out his career like that, that's his business.
Well, apparently, and I'm getting this from friends of mine who work as broadcasters out west. Apparently, he's very much into Aaron Rodgers, which, if you were around Johnny Unitas like I was, John was into John. I mean, John was the quarterback. He didn't say anything in the huddle and whatever the case may be. But yeah, I kept thinking, why would Green Bay give him up? They need a few pieces. Obviously, every team every year has to bring in a couple of guys because it's free agency and everything involved. But I thought, why would he leave a place where he has a chance to go back and get a ring, another one? And Love hasn't worked out, that's for sure. So then Green Bay's not going to put the ball in his hands. So it didn't make any sense with Peter King going, oh, he's going to go to Denver. He's going to go here. I'm thinking, I don't know what you're on, guys. But
I mean, I know you know this, but for the folks, a lot of what you read, especially in the speculation department, it comes from agents. Either player agents, sometimes coaches' agents might have a favored reporter and put a bug in that person's ear and go, hey, Peter, I know Denver wants him bad. Elway wants him bad. Everybody there really wants him. They'll figure out a way to get it done. And so Peter can say he got it from a source. Now, ideally, if someone like that is going to double check his information, a trained journalist should. And whatever his sources are may either confirm or deny. But you can still say or write things like, well, I'm hearing that, whatever it's
Right.
Denver made some sense from a strictly football point of view, is that they're struggling at quarterback, and they have, they've got a pretty good defense, although they gave up Von Miller to the Rams, which certainly helped them. But I don't know if Russell Wilson suddenly turns Denver into an immediate contender, because you have to wonder about, you talk about the mileage on Aaron Rodgers, the mileage on Russell Wilson, and maybe even more mileage, because Rodgers stopped really running for the sake of running about 3 years ago. He'll do it very rarely now. And Wilson still is sort of the modern day Fran Tarkenton for your older listeners and viewers.
Yeah, I remember that.
Still runs around a bit more. So, but I think it's wonderful for Denver, and now it's Seattle. It clearly has sent the message to their fans that we're starting over.
I remember meeting Fran Tarkenton some years ago, and I said, "What's the most common thing you heard when you were scrambling around?" He said, "From my offensive lineman, look out!" He said, because they would take off. And I even asked my brother. I said, "Was he that difficult?" He said, "Gary, he's not very tall, and he'd just move around like crazy on you, and he had great moves." He said Archie Manning was the same way.
Yeah, he just played for some terrible, terrible teams. If you switch the two guys around and Manning gets to play with the good Viking teams that Tarkenton played for, it might have been an interesting career to see. But we could do that all day. But yeah, it's I think Rodgers belongs there. I fully expected it, and I had no inside information. I'm just an opinion that's the spot for him. Obviously, the size of the contract is going to be as big a story as anything else. I don't know how it's broken down. I don't think it's 50-50-50. I'm sure it probably pays more on the back end. So there's even a more urgent win right this minute attitude now in Green Bay, somewhat like what the Rams did. Will they, what can they do cap wise? And I don't have figures in front of me. Can they beef the offensive line up a little bit? Maybe add one more good receiver, possibly in the draft, to complement Devontae Adams, and maybe shore up the secondary a little bit. I think otherwise and kicker. Looks like they're going to have to do something about their kicking game, and they've already changed special teams coaches, which had to happen, and now they're probably going to have to change kickers too. Yeah,
no, I mean, but it's pleasing to you, I know, because frankly, I wish I could figure out what my Colts are going to do with Carson Wentz, who I just have. Brian Boldinger, who's a dear friend of mine, I think you know Brian too.
Yeah.
When that trade was made, I said to him, Brian, what do you think? By the way, Brian lives in Fort Lauderdale part of the year. I said. Yeah, he's got a condo right near the beach. How about that? And I said to him, I said, what do you think? He said, Gary, I wouldn't trust him. He said, now you guys don't. he said, you guys don't have much of a choice at the time, but there's not much out there. There's nothing much in the draft. I'm not going to go for Sam Howell. I don't like him because of what he did to our Canes the last few years.
All Sam Howell had to do was hand the ball off.
Yeah.
Especially 2 seasons ago. No, I think Wentz is just an average guy and not terribly reliable. He's a little bit worse Jared Goff. And I don't see the effect, but you brought up a good point. Indy didn't really have a choice. And I don't know if this is a kick-ass quarterback group coming out this year or not.
No.
But so the Colts.
The kid from Pittsburgh is about, I guess, the top level there. And
yeah, that looks that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we tore him apart in the college game, didn't we? I mean, we beat Pittsburgh pretty good, didn't we, this past year?
Yeah. As I said, there's not that obvious. This is going to be the quarterback, like when in the case of Joe Burrow and that quarterback class. There's nothing like that. Maybe eventually that will change, and I hope it does. Maybe somebody always pops out, somebody emerges from the middle of the draft and ends up being a good player.
I want to talk about something that I know you talked about a number of times on your Nooner broadcast. I'm sure Defo probably has talked about it. Joe has talked about it. There was a talk at one time that Deshaun Watson would be coming to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen, and I don't think anything is going to happen with Deshaun Watson until this legal schmiegel clears itself up. There have been some teams like Philadelphia that have made some inquiries about where he is legally, but if I was an owner, Dave, I don't know whether I'd want him on my team, period. I just don't know. I don't know the man's character. It doesn't seem to be very high.
If he's cleared, then in my mind, it's still going to be a stain, but I think you could always point to the facts and go, hey, I'm sorry you don't like him, but he was found innocent. And if he's not cleared, then that'll be taken care of separately, and you probably won't see him again in the NFL. No, I wouldn't want him either, because I think, you do have to think about what your fans want, what they like. And number one thing is fans like winning. The second thing is they like to like their team and like their players. And I don't know if Deshaun Watson at this point is a likable player. I kind of think he's not. So when you have this kind of a situation, and I'm not sure what is taking so long to resolve the legalities of all of this, and I'm far from a lawyer or a judge or anybody in law enforcement, so I couldn't begin to tell you why this has dragged on as long as it has. But there needs to be some kind of resolution for everybody's sake, for the people that have made the accusations, for Watson and his family, for law enforcement, for everybody. We need to get this resolved. Is he really this bad of a person? Then he's got to, you don't belong in the NFL. And if he's innocent, then he needs to move on with his career, and somebody will probably take a shot at him. But I'm not disappointed the Dolphins gave up on him. I think that was a wise move. And at the time they were talking, they have crapped all over Tua Tagovailoa. And
let's not forget the coach, what they did to him. Come on.
I know. Very weird. That whole thing is weird. I'm dying to see this play out. I'm really, did Ross really make that offer? Why would you say that if it wasn't true? That's an enormous legal risk. If you make an accusation like that and it's not true and you can't prove it, then you could be on the hook. You could get sued back very easily. And should be, honestly. If I were Stephen Ross, that's what I would do. Yeah. But if he did say that, then he shouldn't have a team anymore.
No.
And so this isn't going to end well for somebody. There's no way on earth this is sort of like put in the freezer and everybody walks away and we don't think about it anymore. There'll be a resolution, and out of this resolution, we're going to have one of those two sides is going to be a big loser.
Yeah, and I can't predict who. Joe Cassell, who's a friend of ours, folks. He wrote something on Facebook about it, and he said, believe me, from what he hears, Stephen Ross is not innocent of any of this stuff. Of course, I'm just quoting. I don't know. And I'm not a legal schmiegel. My brother Michael, besides a football player, was a lawyer.
Yeah, and Joe was a lawyer. So
let's talk about the hypocrisy of the NFL. Calvin Ridley. This to me is just The man bet $1,500. He was
Mhm.
on suspension from the team. He had already taken a leave of absence because of family issues or personal issues. The NFL has coddled up to every betting organization in the world. Every league has coddled up to all the betting organizations you could possibly think of. And now they suspend this guy for $1,500, and he was betting on multiple teams in I guess you call it a parlay. You would know better than
Parlay.
I on that. I'm not a gambler. Where you
Right.
pick 3 or 4 teams here, and you pick 3 or 4 teams here, and you bet so much. And the Falcons happen to be in a couple of those parlays, and that's where suddenly the Hard Rock in Hollywood is the ones that reported him. Which
Well, that must have been
when
that very short period of time when they had their app running then.
Yeah, they reported him, and legally they had no choice. But the hypocrisy for me is the guy's not in the game. Maybe he's getting inside information from his buddies with the Falcons, but I don't get it. $1,500, and then you suspend him for an entire game, 3 or 4 games. I could see, make him take some classes if he's willing to come back, because I know he has some psychological issues. But is this not the ultimate hypocrisy?
No.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. To me, it's a very simple cut and dried. He's under contract. And in that contract, I'm guessing that there is language that you have to follow the rules of both the Atlanta Falcons and the National Football League. And when you violate those rules, there are a series of consequences. And he broke a rule. Look, I love to gamble. I'm very pro gambling. I'm going to Las Vegas next week for about the 12th or 13th time for the first weekend of March Madness. So I'm
Where are you going to stay?
pro gambling. I go with a group of guys. So this year we're at Treasure Island.
I performed. I lived there for 10 years.
No, you're a very lucky man.
I was an entertainer. I opened for Engelbert, Tom Jones, Michael Bublé, Kenny Rogers named my first cat, my black cat, Furball, because that's how he looked. TI is a nice place. That was one of Steve Wynn's original hotels.
Right. It's now Radisson has it now, and it's showing its age a little bit, to be honest. Especially since they're going to take the Mirage away in a year or so and build a new guitar hotel, much like the one down in Hollywood. But anyway, so there you have an idea how I feel about gambling. I am far from anti-gambling. But to me, I look at it this way. If you or I are under the same auspices, the same contract, we make the same mistake, we're going to have to pay for it. If Calvin Ridley was truly out of football, and he wasn't because he was still under contract, then that's another thing altogether. And if 3 seconds after he plays his last game in the NFL, if he wants to start doing commercials for a casino or a betting app, go after it, man. Go make your money. That's great. But no, I just can't engender a ton of sympathy for him for what he did. He made a mistake. He broke a rule. And that, I'm sorry, there are consequences. Now, is it too much? Maybe the NFL is going to have to revisit its punishments for these situations, and maybe you do it by the amount of money. Certainly, betting on anything involving your team is another thing I do have an issue with, because you touched on it. Maybe he does know things, good or bad. Maybe he knows that, listen, the offensive line, there's 2 or 3 starters who are going to play, but they're going to take shots before the game, and they're in pain, and they're slower, and the other guy opposite them is an all-pro, and they're going to get to our quarterback today. So, I think if I'm going to do this parlay, I'm going to do it, giving points rather than taking them. Or the other way of taking them rather than giving them. I have a problem with that. I do. So that's how I feel about it. Your point is not lost, and I don't think you're nuts or anything, but I'm sorry. And that's why I don't have a lot of sympathy.
Well, you do know me, Dave. I am a little nuts,
Yeah, but I don't have sympathy for Pete Rose either in that regard. Because what's the number one rule, and always has been, you don't bet on games. And what did he do blatantly and repeatedly over and over again? And we have this guy now who's got 2 legacies. His baseball playing legacy. We watched him play. We know how great he was. There's zero dispute to that. And it's a gigantic but. This other thing happened, and that's why he's kind of in this limbo. And it's an argument that I can't stand even getting into anymore, because it's been going on for 150 years.
By the way, go over to Caesar's Palace in front of there's a sporting goods store there in the little mall that they have.
Oh, I know. I've seen it. I have.
I used to radio with him in West Palm Beach.
I'll tell you the story. Well, I guess I can tell this story publicly.
Go ahead.
When Joe Rose and I were doing the first team, we both got invited to a charity golf event in Bonaventure or maybe Weston, one of the two. So I'm at my bag, whatever, got enough golf balls for the day. And somebody comes over to me and says, "Hey, Dave, yeah, Pete would like to say hello to you," meaning Pete Rose.
Yeah.
Cool. So I come over, shake his hand, we talk. And this is, obviously he's been out of it for a while. And we chatted, and within 30, 45 seconds, we're talking gambling. We're talking about some NFL stuff that happened on the day before on Sunday that he had bets on. Okay, now that's okay. That's a normal conversation between two guys, but he doesn't even know me personally. He knows of me, and he's talking about that. So that's just his personality. That's who he is. He was a hard driving player. He's a hard driving gambler. You're right. He does the autographs, and I've seen him out there with Snake Stabler, the late Ken Stabler.
Yeah.
And you have to pay to walk in the door, and I've never done that, but to get his autograph, or sometimes he has a guest with him. And if that's how he wants to make his living, that is perfectly okay. But let's not, pretend that this was good for the game, that he did this, because it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. And he did it when he was a player. He did it when he was a manager. And that's the oddball part. I asked my brother once about that. I said, "Were you ever tempted to bet on any football games?" He said, "Do I look stupid to you?" He said, "First of all, I don't know the first thing about gambling." He said, "Dad goes to the blackjack table. I don't. I stay away from casinos." He said, "I like my life just the way it is." And I think a lot of professionals take what they do to heart. It's the same as what you do. It's the same as what I do. And you take it, and you're a professional about it, and you don't take advantage of situations.
My dad used to preach something, Gary, he called preventative medicine. And my dad was a guy who never smoked, never drank, none of that stuff. And he would just say, "Look, don't put yourself in that position in the first place." And now that's very basic advice. My dad was not a fancy person by any means. He was pretty straightforward and pretty basic in the way he led his life. But he was right. And many times you say to yourself, "Wait a minute, if I do this, then the other stuff might happen that I don't want to have happen. So why do this in the first place?" And that's what he would refer to. Haven't always been like that, of course. Nobody is. But I always think about that preventative medicine. Don't put yourself in that position if you can avoid it.
My dad had a similar saying: "You don't give people the ammunition to put you down.
Yeah.
Just stay away from it." But it was cool. Derek Jeter resigns as part of the Miami Marlins, and he said two very interesting things, David. "I feel as though I've left," and I'm paraphrasing, of course. "I feel as though I've left the Marlins in better position now than it was 5 years ago," which I don't understand that at all. They're still, except for the 2020 season where it was an anomaly. And he said that, the management and I just don't agree on what direction we need to go in. What is he referring to that he left the team better, other than getting a few players here and there that are good that eventually leave due to free agency or a trade? The Marlins are bottom feeders.
I think what they've done is they have assembled some young talent in their farm system, and I think that's what he's referring to. One of these days, if they ever keep their young players, and in trading away, and I don't have names in front of me, so I'll tell you that right off the bat. But I think he's done okay with that. He hired the first woman as a general manager. That's a significant move in a male-dominated sport. So I give him props for doing that. As far as the direction comment, then since nobody is telling us, we have to either guess or just let it sit there. Now, letting it sit there isn't any fun. So to have fun, my guess is that he's probably tired of the cheap approach and wants to throw more chips out there and try to build a competitive team, which every time that seems to happen, this team really does well. The franchise does well. This was never a big money group. You do not have a Jerry Jones running this franchise. You do not have a Mark Cuban running this franchise with oodles and oodles of money where they just wake up sneezing dollar bills, $100 bills. That's not the case with this organization. So I just think all of that, the penuriousness and all of that just finally got to him. And maybe he realizes that being an executive isn't what he thought he was going to be. Now, if he stays in the game as an executive, then that statement is incorrect. And I don't know what he's going to do next. I don't see him as a broadcaster because he's kind of dull. But I'll be curious to see what his next step is. Besides being Derek Jeter and the fame that goes with it, if he will remain in the game and in what capacity.
I just want to remind everybody you're watching Main Street. We're on at 2 p.m. every Tuesday afternoon. My guest this afternoon is the renowned broadcaster, Mr. Dave Lamont, and fellow Hurricane, and which we're going to get to that in just a little while. And I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us here this afternoon. Major League Baseball season. Do you see it going to what we would call the All-Star break before we see any games, or is this going to be done in increments of 2 weeks at a time?
Well, I like yours. I don't know if they're ready to just take the eraser to the schedule like you insinuated, but when you said that, it made me think that might end up being what happens here, because this is clearly two entrenched sides. And as everybody knows, negotiation is nothing but compromises, a series of compromises until you get to a point where you feel, okay, I can live with that. And the owners seem to want to destroy the MLBPA, which that ain't going to happen.
No.
So that's a foolish quest on their part. You seem to have a commissioner who doesn't like baseball. And I had this conversation the other day in Milwaukee, of all places, the hometown of Bud Selig. Say what you will about Bud Selig, and he certainly had great moments and terrible moments as the commissioner. But you knew that his decisions were made from a position of love of the game. He was and is a fan of baseball. So I'll live with a guy like that as opposed to somebody who doesn't seem to care and is only out to maybe burn down the players so he can look better to his owners. That bothers me. And so I just, before that we had, the late Bart Giamatti and I think Fay Vincent. These guys liked or loved baseball. And then Selig, same thing. Again, perfect? Of course not. No commissioner is perfect. But this guy, no. I'm not sure what he likes. Apparently golf, since he was caught practicing a swing in the stands during the negotiations. But it's seems like a strange dude to me to be running a professional sport. Yeah. And I just don't know what the hell's going to happen. I mean, you read stories that everybody is increasingly pessimistic because of this luxury gap. And we know the teams that have voted against it and have voted in favor of so there doesn't seem to be, I don't want to say there's no leadership, that wouldn't be true, but there just doesn't seem to be a willingness to compromise. Or if I say that, I'm sure somebody would yell, "Oh, we're trying to compromise, but they won't compromise," that kind of thing.
Yeah. All I can think of is that the ownerships in all the leagues, football, baseball, basketball, etc., they're not the same kind of men that led these organizations when we were growing up. That love football, love baseball. Yeah, they were businessmen and they wanted to make money, but they're the guy that owns the Washington football team, Jerry Jones, is a businessman. They're not the same as the Carol Rosenblums or the.
Well, no, man, I'm not sure that's the guy you'd like to put out as your paragon of virtue.
No, well, listen, I know the stories. Believe me, I know the stories. But what I'm saying is, he loved. There was more than just the ownership. Nowadays these guys, they own the teams, and it's like Dave Lamont goes out and buys a yacht. It's one of those deals. They all have a yacht, and the scandals that are going on now are just awful.
Jerry Jones loves football. He played the game at Arkansas. I think he loves football. Dan Snyder with the Commanders now, I don't know what his story is. He's a DC guy, so you would think that he would, have grown up and he idolized Joe Gibbs and all of that, which any Washington fan still does, including me. But he's a strange man. He built, by all accounts, one of the worst stadiums in the league, and it's not that old. Now, I to your point is, there was, but the other thing that's different too is when we were growing up, a lot of these owners had businesses. They had other lives that they ran businesses, or maybe it was a corporation that owned the team. Now you've got guys who have already made that money, like Jerry Jones is a perfect example. I mean, Jerry will never die poor.
No,
and all of the Mark Cuban, although I think he's the guy who actually loves the NBA and is very good for the NBA, made his fortune. Now they just maintain their fortunes, occasionally do some other things to build onto it, but their main job is running these teams. And you had a bunch of guys like a Paul Brown or a George Halas who played the game or coached the game.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that kind of thing anymore because these franchises are worth so very much money. And despite all of the complaints of the fans and the teeth gnashing about how the salary is going to ruin the game forever, these franchises, almost all of them, or many of them, I should say, are worth billions of dollars. It's actually a very good investment.
Yeah. I mean, I can go back to my brother's first contract with the Colts, $25,000.
Well, that's pretty good then. If that was that for 1
Yeah.
year?
Yeah, that was for 1 year.
Was
The most
very good.
Yeah, the most he ever made, and he was only, I think he told me later in years, he was only at that point 15,000 below what Unitas was getting. What people don't realize is those players went off and had jobs during the off season.
Well, they had to. Now, again, we have to also correlate it to what like 25,000 was then compared to what it is today. Now, 25 back then is actually good.
It was above the average, yes.
It's above the average. I mean, there were guys making 9, 10, 11, and then were, beer salesmen or insurance or got into broadcasting or whatever and made other careers for themselves. And actually, they were smart because a guy like, for example, the late Sam Huff ended up getting into the hotel industry of Marriott and made big money as the guy who really started recruiting sports teams to stay at Marriott's.
Yeah.
And that worked out for everybody, worked out for the hotel chain, worked out for the company, worked out for Huff. So he got that training in the off season after making his 12, 13,000 as an all pro linebacker.
Yeah. He was an amazing guy to meet. I mean, I got through Michael to go to a lot of these chicken dinners, these rubber chicken dinners that they would have. And I remember meeting Vince Lombardi once, and and he said to me, he said, "So you're going to grow up to be," now Michael was 6'3", almost 6'4". I'm barely 6 feet tall. I'm 5'11". And he said, "Are you going to grow up to be like your brother?" I said, "No, I got more brains than that." And Lombardi just got this grin on his face, and he looked at Mike and he said, "He probably does," And so, but he was really nice. Sam Huff was very, very nice. Even Unitas was very nice. I'll tell you a quick story. When Unitas died, I was living in Fort Lauderdale, actually Dania. And my brother calls me up and he says, "Are you coming to the funeral?" And I said, "No, I hadn't thought about it." "Well, come up to the funeral." So I went up to the funeral and I'm walking through the airport in Baltimore. Now, they don't have the Ravens yet. Well, no, yeah, they do have the Ravens. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of them. They have the Ravens.
No, they have the Ravens, yeah.
Yeah, they had the Ravens when John died. And I grabbed a jacket on the way out, a windbreaker. And I'm walking down the concourse for Southwest, and I'm getting the finger and booing, "Hey, up yours." I get to the end, and Mike is greeting me there. And I said, "These people are yelling and screaming at me. What did I do?" He said, "Turn around." And I had a Colts jacket on. He said, "Take that thing off and burn it around here." He said, they're still whatever. But
yeah, and they're still that way. I have one of my very dearest friends who I play golf with is from that area, and it's never going to be forgiven. And it's weird. I don't even know if the Cleveland people feel that way, and they got the Browns back, or a different version of the Browns. But yeah, that scar in Baltimore, I don't think for some people will ever heal.
They asked to take the name back, and Irsay at one point was willing to sell the name back to them, but then he got not Jimmy, but his dad, and he
got drunk and said no.
No, but my whole point was that when I went to the funeral, and just as they were lowering the body in the ground, the banner that flew over Memorial Stadium for John's last game flew over the cemetery, and it said, "Unitas we stand."
Yeah, I remember that banner, sure.
Yeah, and it was just unbelievable. And the fans in Miami who gave him his last game in 1971.
His last game in Baltimore.
No, his last game in Miami at the OB.
No, but his last game with Baltimore is what I meant to say.
Yeah. And that was a decrepit stadium. If you ever got in there, boy, that was a decrepit stadium.
Yes,
but at the OB, the fans gave him a standing ovation. They got there early. The Dolphins, remember, used to be in the end zone, the closed-in end zone. They'd work out and everything. And the Colts, or the visiting team, would be in the open end zone where Flipper used to do his little tricks. And the Colts were all out there, but Johnny Unitas, nobody saw him yet, and they were waiting for him. And then suddenly he comes out of the tunnel by himself. He gets to about the end line of the beginning of the end zone, and Shula sees him and walks over, and the crowd, I'm almost to tears now. The crowd erupt.
Did they say like F off to each other?
No.
So they had a symbol exchange for once. So that's good.
Yeah, they did for once. I mean, my brother had problems with John too. I mean, John was not the easiest person in the
I
world
think
to
a
get
lot of
along
people
with.
did. I know that Mike liked Don.
Yeah.
But I could see that. I think based on what I've seen of your brother, those two are fairly similar personalities. But I know that Shula and Unitas were famously not the best of friends. And I've heard that John could be. I think some guys just sort of resented all the focus was on him, but at the same time, the focus was on him because he was
He
John
was it.
Unitas.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah. I want to turn over to college football. You and I both are Canes fans. We love the Canes. We went there. The NIL and the transfer portal. How much has it helped the game, and how much is it going to hurt the game in the long run?
I don't think the NIL is going to hurt that much. I'm all for it. Because of, again, I go back to how much is being made off of their image, and if somebody wants to do this, then how is it hurting you or I? If a car dealer wants to get the starting quarterback in Fayetteville, Arkansas, a deal, how is that bad? Shouldn't affect the product on the field. It's not like it's okay to me because I always use Tim Tebow as an example. How many Florida jerseys were sold during his time there with his number on them?
Yeah.
And exactly how many dollars did he make from it? Now, he was assured a good life afterwards. Now, he was not a super successful pro football player, but you knew that he was not going to just fade away and show up at your Walmart stocking boxes. You knew he was going to stay famous. A Heisman Trophy winner, national champion, all the things he accomplished.
And he's a nice guy.
Well, all of that. He's a public figure.
Yeah.
And he was going to he'll be a public figure for the rest of his life. But my point is, they made good money off of that number. So why wouldn't he get any of it? It seems only fair to me. So I'm okay with now the transfer portal. Here's where things have changed so dramatically, Gary. In the time that we were at the U, and hell, we didn't have a men's college basketball. We had a women's team. We didn't have a men's team when I was a student there.
Yeah.
Today, guys, if they don't play right away, I don't want to say give up, but just start looking around like, where can I play? I have no loyalty to this town. I have no loyalty to this campus, no loyalty to this coach who's not playing me. They said they were going to play me or I understand that not every situation for a student athlete is ideal. Listen, I've had my youngest son has gone to a couple different places to get right. Now he's in a good spot. My oldest played 4 straight years at Western Michigan playing basketball. Wouldn't have had it any other way. Some guys either are upset about their playing time. They might get homesick. They might screw up, and it's just a way to leave quietly without their screw up going public. They may get a better offer. And now the NIL may make it easier. I mean, I can tell you this: the same son who was at Western Michigan is now a GA at Texas, and for Chris Beard. And we were talking about this, and he just sort of laughed about it. Everybody's got a deal, and they're good deals. Now, Austin, Texas, you got major money boosters. You've got a state capital. It's a college town. It's going to attract money. It's a booming city, man. You wouldn't believe that place.
I've performed there a few times.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and it's a great place to visit. So it's not going away. I wish there was something we could do about the transfer portal, but if it winds up in court, how do you stop it?
We need to. Do you think we need to put some more rules in place?
But like what?
Well, I mean, I understand coaches can come and go as they please, pretty much. But don't you think maybe a player? They need to put a rule in place that says, hey, if you've already been here a year, or two, yeah, you can transfer. You don't see much of a future here, or you do want to go home. Like you said, a lot of these kids that are recruited as freshmen, their first year, they realize, I really want to play close to home. I miss home. That's why I don't pay much attention to the recruiting classes that come in and no matter what college you're talking about, because 2 or 3 years down the line, most of those
Oh yeah,
guys aren't even going to school anymore.
yeah, I know.
You know, but maybe some rules about when they can transfer out, when they can transfer in. I mean, it seems like some guys. I mean, and I understand they're caught. If Dave Lamont is the head coach of the University of Miami, and suddenly he takes the job today, and 2 years later he's moving on. Maybe the kids that he came in because of Dave need to be able to move if
See,
they
that's
want to
the
move
thing. I
out.
think people need to know that most of the time, players are playing for the coaches. They're not playing for the school. They're not playing for the colors. Maybe even it's their hometown university, and that maybe that's an attraction. Maybe they're 2,000 miles away. They're going because of you or the
Hmm.
assistant, you and the assistant who was your lead recruiter. So if you leave, a kid has every right to say, well, wait a minute. We asked you in our living room or on our Zoom call, were you going to stay there for my 4 years? And you said yes. Now, so how do you deal with that? The other thing that I think is completely forgotten is, all right, we have 12 guys on let's say 15 players on a basketball team, only 12 dress. What about those other 3 guys or the guys at the very end of the bench who now realize, I'm not a Division I player. And
Hmm.
all I'm doing is playing every 9 games for 30 seconds, and I'm practicing my butt off as the scout team guy, but I want to play.
Mm.
So you transfer, and the coach will support you in this because a coach's job is to get better players every year. And one of the best lines I've ever heard, a college football coach, PJ Fleck, who's at Minnesota, told his players, "My job is to get players better than you," and he's right.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, he's going to get stale or he's going to lose.
Yeah.
So think of those kids at the end of the bench or the third string guard on a football team who maybe sees 15 snaps a year. And maybe he sticks with the school because they have a great program and this is what he's going to do with his real life. Maybe he just wants to go play. So he goes
Yeah.
to Division II or the NAIA or these other smaller, and he can now play and get the education and hopefully have it paid for.
Yeah.
Still have that scholarship to take the heat off the parents. So not all the transfers are bad. And in other cases, let's face it, and you know this, Gary, there's other cases where you and I, I'm the coach, you walk into my office and we both agree this isn't your place. You're not getting along with the players, or I don't like you anymore, and you need to move on. You need to go
Yeah.
to another school. We won't say anything bad about you when they call, but you need to put your name in that transfer portal because you're not coming back next year. We're not going to renew your scholarship.
I was
Remember, a lot of those
surprised.
scholarships are
Yeah.
year to year.
Yeah. I was surprised to see the offensive lineman that left the Canes as soon as Mario came on the scene. I was really surprised
Well,
to see a couple of the guys
Mario's made
leave.
a lot of people happy, but you can't make them all happy. I know you can't make them all happy.
No, no.
And you're thinking loyal to Manny Diaz? What? Yeah, that happens. It
Yeah.
does happen. And and for all we know, and we don't, maybe Mario gently suggested that a new college might be in order for him.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'm praying. I really am praying. I can't take another North Carolina Tar Heels beating us. I just can't. I just
Well,
can't sit there and watch that anymore.
I mean, Mac Brown happens to be a buddy of mine, so that's a game I can tolerate. But I understand, and really, any good vibe that was coming out of that 2020 season that year with Manny Diaz was lost. I think the North Carolina game soured him on Canes fans forever. Because there were some hopes up there. There was a chance to have a pretty darn good season. They were willing to forget FIU. They were willing to forget that. Well, I don't know. I forgot when it was that same season, that horrible.
Wasn't it
Louisiana
Pittsburgh?
Bowl
Was
game.
it Pittsburgh at the end that beat them the
Yeah,
last game or something?
and so people were willing to overlook that, but the North Carolina game was so bad, and they gave up so many rushing yards that I don't think that he was ever able to recover in the
No.
eyes of Hurricanes fans. And so he takes the next year almost as a lame duck, the 2021 season. And again, it's a kind of a typical year. It's a big up and it's a big down. It's a big up and then you lose. One of the things that's plagued this team for years has been losing games that they're favored in, that they should win and don't. And that That's the thing that's got to change. The only time that really didn't happen was Mark Richt's first year when they started out with the 10 straight wins.
Right, right. Well, I'm hoping that Mario can turn things around. And, I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I remember, what was it, 2 years ago or so, we took on Notre Dame there at Hard Rock, and we just beat them in the ground. And I love to watch that because I was living in Chicago when that
That's
convicts
big
versus
Notre
the
Dame
Catholic
country up
thing.
there. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, are you talking about the game where when Mark was still coaching?
Was it Mark coaching where
Yeah,
Notre Dame came down here and
came
Quentin?
down here at night and just got thumped.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
and
Mark's. That was the first year of the turnover chain too. So I remember the crowd making as much noise about that chain coming out
yeah.
when there was a turnover by Notre Dame as they did about anything else that happened in the game.
And I was so happy to hear that we're doing away with that thing, because I
Yeah.
thought, all right, after the first year, everybody else is copying it. Let's get rid of it. Let's move on. I mean, there's no point to it anymore. You've made your point, and we weren't that great of a defense after that anyway. So,
Well, I remember announcing games where it got so out of hand. Boise State brought a chair and called it the turnover throne. I forgot what team now did it. They came down to the Boca Bowl. They had the turnover. They had club turnover. They set up like ropes and popped confetti instead of champagne, of course. Did it
right.
that way. Of course, you had the embarrassing turnover backpack. You had people at Florida State, which was horrible. You had people with like the turnover wood, so somebody would hold on to a plank. I mean, everybody copied it, and I do think it ran its course. And the best way to make that thing look cool is to be a consistent winner. And certainly Miami has been anything but that.
Yeah. We've only got about 5 minutes left here.
Mhm.
Dave, if there's one thing you could change about college football, basketball, baseball, whatever, is it the recruiting? Is it the amount of games? Is it the fact that we should just be grateful we have teams to support? What would you change? Rules or or recruiting or whatever?
In football, and I was, as you're asking the question, I'm trying to come up with an answer. And the first thing that popped into my head, and it may not be my best answer, we need to adjust the targeting rule. I think the punishment is too severe.
Yeah.
I think the idea behind the punishment was the officials and the people who put this rule together thought that, Coach Gary is going to take an enforcer out there and wipe out the team's best receiver with a cheap shot to the head. And then you get thrown out, but you're the fourth guy anyway. Big deal. And we knocked your number one guy. Well, that's not happening. And I think almost you need to turn to soccer and go red card, yellow card. You're looking at this on replay anyway. Determine the severity and the intent of it. Because a lot of these targeting calls are you lower your head to come in to hit me, and then I'm the back. I go to hit, and I lower my head. I'm lowering my head now to match you. I'm making myself an easier target to hit.
Yeah.
So I would do it that way. Red, you're out. Yellow, you get another one. I think what they're worried about is that guy will go, okay, I get one more shot at somebody's head. But then I think there would be consequences, another suspension, or maybe even a longer one.
Yeah, and
even
even
one game or 1/2 suspension.
And I think your coach, because if you get a
That's the
15-yard
first thing.
penalty, yeah. What else you got?
What's killing college basketball is lack of identity for players because of the one and done rule. But legally, you damn well know it's going to happen. If you take that to court, you lose fast. So I wish we could get rid of one and done. I wish we did have the days where guys played 3 or 4 years, and they so rarely do. But I don't think we could do anything about that. If we could, I would. I would use the college baseball rule. You're obligated, if you're going to stay with the big school, you're obligated to go for 3 years. If you want to play JC ball or maybe NAIA or whatever, then you can do 2 and you're draft eligible. But that's never going to happen. And with baseball, I would just like to get a commissioner who gives a crap about the game. That's the biggest thing. I'm tired of hearing about the slowness of the sport. I don't know what else you can do. I really don't. And another thing I would do is bring back the bullpen carts from the 70s with the helmets, because I don't know why those went away.
Those were great.
That doesn't make a lick of sense. And by the way, it would speed the game up by a few seconds because that run from the bullpen takes a while. Get me a nice hot looking cart. Get somebody to drive that sucker, and let's bring the bullpen carts back to baseball.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. The only thing that bothers me about college football is we've made a big deal out of these kids being recruited to the to Florida State on these 2 signing days. And as I said earlier, and I know you agree with me because we both went to the U, how many of these guys, save the Canes, signed 18 guys this year? How many of them are really going to be around 3 years from now?
Or even 4, yeah. And by the way, one other thing about transfers, I don't mind if the guy plays 4 years and then goes and plays a fifth. That's fine.
Yeah.
You always rate recruiting classes after they play. I always have chuckled at, now, yes, is it more relevant that if you're Georgia or Alabama, you get more 5 stars than, Wake Forest? Yeah, it's relevant because likely those guys are going to be good players. But it's also up to the coaches to develop the 3-star players as well. And that's what made some of these that's what Boise State did for so long, especially under Greg Peterson. And what made him great for so long was they would take the kids that nobody wanted and coach the living hell out of them and make them better football players.
Yeah.
I think it's so funny. We forget, we just assume that Bama's going to be 1 and Georgia's going to be 2 and Clemson's going to be in the top 5 for recruiting classes. But we don't look at it 4 years later and go back and go, okay, now let's see who was a contributor, who rode the bench, and who left town, or who flunked out, or who got hurt and couldn't continue his career, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the recruiting's gone way out of line. Dave Lamont, you are a dear friend and a good friend, and you are a professional in every way sensitive can be. I can't wait till I come home because I want to sit with you and Defo and Joe and everybody and have lunch and just talk sports and just talk fun. And, I'm living up here in Palm Bay, Florida, the thriving metropolis. What an interesting place this is. The all-night diner closes at 12 noon, Dave.
Hello.
And before I say goodbye to Dave, and he's going to stick around for a couple minutes after the show, I want to thank all of you out there for joining us. Next week, we'll have another show at 2 p.m. I've got a couple of people maybe lined up. Ray Abruzzo from The Sopranos, another dear friend of mine from my young days as an actor in Los Angeles. I don't know if Ray's going to be able to make it or not, but we're going to try to get him on soon. I want to thank all of you so much for joining us here on Main Street at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. I want to thank Rick Del Vecchio, my executive producer, for putting this all together. And I want to thank everybody. Andreas, my producer. Sorry we were a little bit late today, but we'll be on time next time. Anyway, until then, please take care of yourselves and each other.